dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one.
We are coming up on a wonderful holiday, and it's a holiday that's celebrated around this country. I mean, almost everywhere in this country we celebrate my mother's birthday, the 4th of July. She's quite a firecracker, and I love her dearly, and so I thank you all for celebrating her birthday. But we also celebrate our independence and the Declaration of Independence. And, the history of this country is actually something that's absolutely miraculous, if you really think about it. It's absolutely miraculous. And we're going to talk a little bit about what this really means. Charles, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can you tone it back just a hair? Maybe it's this. There we go. Is that a little better? Thank you. Still get some? Okay. All right. So anyway, I was thinking about this idea of independence, thinking about what it means to be independent. And, when we talk about independence, another term that we oftentimes equate with independence is freedom, and this idea of being free. And part of our history is really declaring really that we are free. And we are declaring that we are free from the control of others. At that time, it was control from the British. And it's a powerful, powerful consciousness when you really think about it. It's a powerful consciousness in lots of different ways. And it really is a powerful consciousness that we want to continue in terms of our spirituality. When I was listening to and thinking about what is that really talking about to be free? I was reminded of the title of the first chapter of one of my favorite books of all times and a favorite unity teaching, Lessons in Truth by H. Cady. How many of you read this work? If you haven't, read it again. If you have, if you haven't, read it. If you have, read it again. And the very first chapter in it is called Bondage or Liberty, Which? Bondage or liberty, which? Now, in the very statement, it implies there's a choice. It implies there's a choice in that. I came across a story about a child who was playing with a very valuable vase, and he had put his hand into the vase and couldn't pull his hand out. And his father, who tried to actually help the young child to pull his hand out, and he couldn't get it out, and they were thinking they were going to have to break this valuable vase. And then the father tried one more time and says, "Now, son, what I want you to do is make one more try. Open your hand like this and hold your finger straight out. And let's see if we can, doing that will actually allow us to pull your hand out of the vase." And the young boy said, "Oh, no, Dad, I can't do that. If I do that, I'll drop my dime." It's amazing the things that we hold on to in life and the things that keep us stuck and the things that we are trying to grasp onto will also be the very things that would keep us blocked and stuck in so many times and so many circumstances in life. I'm reminded of, this is actually the way that in many African countries they actually trap monkeys. They will take a coconut and they will actually cut open the coconut, and then they'll put a hole in one side of the coconut, and they'll put an orange inside that coconut shell and then glue it back together again. And what happens is that the monkey will reach its hand into the coconut for the orange and try to pull his hand out and won't be able to, because the monkey will not let go of the orange. I think about that, and I think that's probably a very apt description of the monkey mind, if you think about it. And we all have a monkey mind. We're all kind of immersed in that, a way of thinking that says that we have to hold on to especially certain ideas and certain beliefs. In our Constitution, it starts off, we behold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Whether you realize it or not, that very statement is an amazing letting go of a particular idea and belief system. And the idea and belief system at that time is that some men were created better than other men. Some people were created better than other people. There was royalty, there was the caste system, there was a class system, and it was God who created this system. And so our Declaration of Independence was basically a statement that says that belief is untrue. It is a false belief. It's a false idea. Well, when I came across, and I came back to reading this wonderful work and was reminded of some of the amazing ideas and teachings that are in this work, I want to read to you, first of all, she starts off with Ephesians 6:10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Think on these things. Emily Cady tells us that every man, and I would say every human being, because this was written back in a time when everything was referred to as man, but every one of us, every man, woman, child, every human being, every person believes themselves to be in bondage to the flesh and to the things of the flesh. And all suffering is the result of this belief. The history of the coming of the children of Israel out of their long bondage in Egypt is descriptive of the human mind or consciousness growing up out of the animal or sense part of man and into the spiritual part. So I want to talk a little bit about what, in some ways, because this is written in early language, more from the 18 and early 1900s, this idea of being bondage to the flesh. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, in Emily Cady's time and in that understanding, that term flesh really had to do with, one, our physical bodies. And there's a belief system that we have inherently that we are somehow in bondage, trapped, we're stuck in and with these physical bodies. And what she's pointing out is that that is at the essence of all of our suffering. But let me kind of go back a little bit. And she says it is this belief that is the cause of all of our suffering. So when they talk about the flesh, they're not just talking about the physical body. They're talking about, and she says, the flesh and the things of the flesh. And this idea and this term was really meant to mean anything out here in the material world. When we believe that we are in somehow being controlled by, that our sense of well-being, that our sense of who we are, that our sense of identity is somehow determined by the physical body, the things that the roles that we play in life, the ways we think about ourselves, or some other person, or some other individual, or some other entity, some other, quote, power, then what we're really doing is we're giving away the truth of our nature. We're basically succumbing to and saying that that has the power over me. And we are really giving up Unity's key number one principle, is that there really is only one presence and one power in the universe, in this place, and in our lives, God, the absolute good. And so this idea that she teaches here is that first of all suffering is a result of this belief. All suffering, in a very real sense, what we're really doing with this belief system is that we are inverting the creative process. You and I are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine, which means that we are created of the very creative process itself. That the very creative process is in the very essence of our nature. And part of our waking up, part of the journey that she talks about even in this very first chapter, is kind of a waking up from what she calls the animal part of ourselves. That part of ourselves that believes that we are simply victims of what is happening out here in the world. And that belief system that we are somehow victims to what's happening out here in the world is the very thing that, interestingly enough, we are creating other experiences in our lives to help validate that belief system. So if we believe that we're victims to what's happening in the circumstances in our lives, this wonderful, amazing, loving, creative power that works through us says, oh, you want to experience being a victim, all of these things out here in the world. Okay, here you go. Here's some more opportunities for being a victim. It's a challenging one, I realize it, because we have been so steeped in this idea, this understanding that it's all them that's doing it to us. And that is the very core of our erroneous belief systems. In a very real sense, I think about this in terms of Eckhart Tolle's teachings also, and I'm a very powerful fan of the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, and really has awakened me in a lot of ways, and I still find myself going to sleep and then going, oh yeah, remember this? I get awakened oftentimes over and over again by insights that I get from Eckhart Tolle. But one of the things that Emily Cady is saying, that Eckhart Tolle is saying, is that we become identified with the physical body, and we believe that's who we are. And that's the key error in consciousness. We get identified with things out here in the world. We believe that somehow our identity is dependent upon something out here. But in reality, that very belief system is one of the things that keeps us from truly expressing the uniqueness of our divine nature. And the moment that we tune our energy into thinking that something out here in the world that ultimately has been created by our perceptions, interestingly enough, what we see and experience out here is kind of like a projection of a thought, an idea, and a belief system. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. We don't see the world as it is. This is one of the basic understandings of really waking to a different consciousness, a consciousness that allows us to experience freedom. The freedom to be the very creative power. Ken Wilber has an understanding that I've really enjoyed and appreciated recently. He talks about the three faces of God. The three faces of God. And ultimately there are three faces to God. And one of the faces of God is that God is this transcendent, external kind of an idea of greater power. And that there is an understanding that when we come to this, that it still can be a very powerful awakening just to recognize that there is something greater, and there is a power, and that there is a power out here in the world. And that the divine does exist out here in the world. And it does work through the world. But then there's another level of understanding that God is not just something out here in the world, but God is the very creative power that's within us. And it still is, it's more of an internal awareness. And unity really tunes into, and it's part of our understanding is how do we wake up to this awareness that that the divine is not just out there. That there's not some being out there that's manipulating and changing and doing it. But there is a power that is is within our being. And that's another level of the face of God, another face of the divine. And one of the things Ken says is that they're all valuable. There's a power in recognizing any of those. And then the third face of God is not that there's a being in here or a power in here. It's even more than that. It's that we are of that power. That we are created in the image and after the likeness of that one divine energy. That we are part of that creative process. And so when we put our energy into a belief system, any belief system, we're going to experience circumstances and situations that validate that belief system. One of the things that Cady says is, today and all days he has been saying to us, his children, I have surely seen the affliction of you who are in Egypt, darkness of ignorance. And I have heard your cry by reason of your taskmasters, sickness, sorrow, and poverty. And I am, not I will, but I am now come down to deliver you out of all of this suffering and to bring you up into a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with good things, with milk and honey, as it says in Exodus 3:7. And she goes on to say, sometime, somewhere, every human being must come to him herself, I'm paraphrasing here, having tired of eating husk, and will arise and go to my Father, go to the source. For it is written, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess to God. Every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess to God. Now she says, don't make this seem like that God is some autocrat out there saying, you're going to do what I tell you to do. That's not what is being said here. It's about being awakened to an understanding that every one of us will eventually get to an understanding and awareness of who and what we truly are. Wow. Everyone will eventually come to an understanding of our unique divine nature. Yes, everyone. Yes, even those people that you think have no hope. You know, the ones that you're thinking of right now, right? And part of our work is not to hold them in bondage, because the very act of holding someone else in a bondage of ignorance, of darkness, of holding them in a place where you see and feel that they somehow can't be enlightened, you are enslaving not only them, but you're enslaving yourself. We're putting ourselves in bondage. And it's by our own thoughts and ideas and belief systems about ourselves and about others and about the world that we're either experiencing an awakening of the possibility of freedom, or we're actually putting ourselves in bondage, and we're also, by putting others in bondage or holding them in that space, we're actually putting ourselves in bondage. There's a saying that, you know, we don't really define another by our judgments. We define ourselves. And so any thoughts that we have that somehow that someone is lost is an erroneous belief system. So what's really keeping us in bondage is beliefs. What are some of the beliefs that are keeping you in bondage? Think about it. What are the limiting ideas that you have about yourself or about another person? What are some of the limiting ideas that you have about the divine? What are some of the limiting beliefs and thoughts that you have about this world out here? We've got them. That's one of the things she says. We're in bondage to them, whether we realize it or not. We're being run, and as I say, we're being programmed. We've been programmed to certain ideas and understandings and beliefs that there's always an us and them. Is that really true? Is it really true that there's such a thing, even for that matter, as an us and a them? what if that's just a belief system that we bought? What if there really is no us and them? And we've been buying into this belief system, and so therefore we set up all kinds of experiences in our lives so that we can experience more us and them. And what if it's all not true? I'm going to suggest to you that's one of the key ideas and understandings of what unity, the word unity, is meant to imply. What if there's a belief system out there that says, in order for me to have what I want and need, I have to get it from you or someone or something out there? You know, that's a pretty prevalent belief system in our world, if you think about it. And part of our unfolding and moving up out of, as Emily Cady calls, the animal part of ourselves, is to look at what are these belief systems that we are holding in consciousness. Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. But the unexamined life is not just about examining what's happening out here, but what's happening in us that is producing and creating what's showing up for us out here. So if we have a belief system that says, and we've bought into an understanding, an idea that, well, they are just like that. That's the way they are. What you've just said is, that's the way I am. What you've just said is, that's the way I am. Now, when I say that's the way I am, that means you've just said, I am a person who judges this other. You follow me? Now, you can do that, don't get me wrong. It doesn't make you bad. It just means that you're going to reap what you sow. We all reap what we sow. What we're putting out, we are going to experience in some form, in some way. It may show up in the same way, it may not. It may show up in a little different variation. It may show up by having your notes fall on the floor. Who knows? So, part of our unfoldment, part of our growing into a place of freedom is to open ourselves up to really look at and examine what is it that I am believing? What am I truly believing about myself? What am I believing about my life? What am I believing about, let's bring it down a little bit. What am I believing about men? What am I believing about women? You see, we like to even lump us into differences in this way. And we have belief systems that we set up about that. And if you bought into this idea that all men are this way, or all women are that way, you have a belief system that is creating your experiences of men and women. Do you realize that? Now, you may have had experiences in your life that validate that belief system. I suspect most of us have. And we therefore believe our experiences and our beliefs over the reality that all men, women, humans, beings are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine. And if we will begin to shift our understanding and our awareness to really look for that and pay attention to that, Emily Cady and other spiritual teachers say, think on these things. Focus our attention on what we truly know is at the heart and the truth, not only of our nature, but of the nature of all in our life and world. She says most of us have believed ourselves not only the slaves of circumstances, but also, at the best, the servants of the Most High. Another understanding here. Neither belief is true. It's time for us to wake to right thoughts, to know that we are not servants, but children. And if children, then heirs. Heirs to what? Why, heirs to all wisdom, so that we need not through any lack of wisdom, make mistakes. Heirs to all love, so that we need know no fear or envy or jealousy. Heirs to all strength, all life, all power, all good. And to be heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. It means everyone is an inlet and may become an outlet of all there is in God. And it means that all God is and has is in reality for us, His only heirs, if we only know how to claim our inheritance. Our inheritance. Well, what is it that you and I can inherit from the very creative source and power of the universe? What is it that we can inherit? All that we can inherit is what the divine is. And the divine is the creative power. And you and I have within us this amazing creative power. And part of our waking up is to recognize that not circumstances that are creating our experiences in life, but it is our energy and our creative consciousness that is creating the circumstances in life. And if we will begin to shift our thinking in this way and begin to say, as we talked about actually just in the last series that we did, what's in this from me? And begin to look at the belief systems that we're holding. When we look at another human being or another person or a circumstance or situation, and let's say we have a belief system that says that certain individuals that are in leadership are somehow erroneous and that are bad and they're evil, or perhaps some others that are opposed to that somehow they're bad or evil. What we're doing is we're participating in creating even more of the the conflicts that we're seeing in our life and world. We are participating in it, whether we realize it or not. Now you can say, well, no, I don't have anything to do with that. I didn't vote that way. Doesn't matter. Or I did vote that way. Well, we're voting every day. Do you realize that? We are voting every day. We're voting with our thoughts. We're voting with our feelings. We're voting with our ideas. We're voting with our emotional energy. We're voting with our... We're voting. We're voting on we're going to perpetuate. We're voting on what we're going to continue. We're voting on the energy that we're putting out. Interestingly enough, we don't seem to have a lot of vote in what seems to be coming in. Doesn't seem like it, does it? Well, in some ways, there's some truth to that. And the reason is because there seems to be something of a delay between what we put out and what comes in. And because there's a delay, we think that we judge, as Jesus said, by appearances. We look at the appearances of what we're seeing out here. We look at the facts, and we believe that those facts are the truth. And the very belief system that says, well, these facts are the truth, is what Emily Cady calls the cause of our suffering. And so part of our unfolding and learning to grow into the divine spiritual beings that we are is to look at the facts not as the truth, but as a consequence of a particular idea and belief system. And then observe and examine what belief system could I possibly have that might generate that kind of experience? What's the belief system that's behind what's showing up in my life? And is that a belief system that's really true and that's really working for me? Is it really manifesting and showing what it is that I truly want to experience in my life? And if it is, fantastic. You're tuning into that creative power in a way that is creating consciously the blessings and the good that you want. And if it's not showing up in quite that way, part of our work is to let go of attachment to believing that we're stuck with that. That's just the way it is. Or that's the way the world is. Or that's the way men are. Or that's the way women are. Or that's the way the government is. Or that's the way... It's not that way. It's only showing up that way because we've collectively bought into a particular idea and belief system. And part of our understanding and work is to shift the energy, the thinking, the ideas, the belief systems that we're holding in consciousness. So let's think about that. What would be an opposite of what you'd want to experience? So let's say you're experiencing a particular experience in a particular relationship. And you have certain ideas about that other in that relationship. We do have ideas about others in our relationship, don't we? And we're pretty sure that our ideas are the right ones. And they're absolutely true because we saw it. And they said it. And they did it just that way. Right? It's got to be true. And not only that, the relationship I was in before, the same thing. So it's got to be true. And the one before that, of course, the same thing. And the thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is the common denominator in that relationship? We don't like to ask those questions very much, do we? I know I don't. I really like to make it about them. It's really a fun game that we like to play. No, it's not really very fun. It's not very fun, is it? And yet we do. We play those same games. We play the tapes, we play the program, we play the belief systems, and that's what we're in bondage to. Not the relationship, but the belief system that we have accepted about the relationship, about the other, and ultimately about ourselves. Don't know if I should get into this morning. Maybe I will. Let me just briefly kind of get into this. And I was kind of contemplating and thinking about the lesson for today and bondage and liberty and freedom and what does that really mean? You know, what does it really mean to be in bondage or liberty or freedom? And one of the things that occurs to me is that my lovely wife, Julie, has a beautiful outfit on today, which I have to say I love very much. And she looks fantastic in it. She looks great in it. I love that. As we're getting this morning, I'm in my buff, getting ready. And I thought, you know, we have a belief system that says that we have to put things on in order to be beautiful. But what's that underlying belief system about that? Underlying belief system that somehow that we're not beautiful unless we put on something. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not ready to, but think about it. You know, there's a belief system there that somehow these physical forms are not beautiful unless we somehow have to make them beautiful. And what if the reality is, the truth is, that we're already amazingly, incredibly beautiful, both in our physical form or out of our physical form? What if the essence of us is beauty? And if we really have that belief system and that knowing and that understanding, one, we don't have to show up by putting things on. We don't have to have things to try and make us beautiful. But what will happen is we'll begin to radiate that. And maybe we'll put things on, and maybe we won't. But if we have that knowing of our sheer beauty, then we emanate that. We radiate that. And I can tell you, life will show up in us and through us and for us as even more beauty. I'm going to suggest to you that's true of all of what we call the divine ideas of love, of abundance, of health, of wholeness. When we really truly get an understanding that our true nature is absolutely whole and complete and beautiful and magnificent and glorious, and we're willing to grow into that feeling and knowing and really tuning into the truth of that, then we don't necessarily have to go and get things to put on in order to make that true. But we may find that we're guided to just express that through whatever we put on in our lives. That's true of our wardrobe, it's true of our politics, it's true of the roles that we play, it's true of the relationships that we get into, it's true of our finances, it's true of our health. When we truly tune into the essence of our divine nature and know the truth of who and what we are, that's our freedom. That's our true freedom. And we don't have to fight anybody for it. We don't have to wrestle it from anyone. We don't have to steal it. We don't have to borrow it. We don't have to wait for someone to recognize it. When we're really coming from that understanding, there's nothing that can take that away from us. And that's the truth. Let's move into our meditation time. And so we move into that comfortable place, that place of stillness, of silence, and of peace. We breathe in and bless the physical form, both the physical body and all of the manifestations in life. And in the very act of blessing, we are already in the process of transforming. So we bless this body temple, and we open our awareness to that divine light of the Christ within. Breathing into our heart space and feeling that connection with our oneness. And as we are centered in this place, I invite you now to just bring into an awareness of some belief system that you've been holding about yourself or another that's not really serving you anymore. And in your mind's eye, just imagine and see that belief as an energy and see it now being moved out of your energy field, of your consciousness, of your thinking, and seeing it now being absorbed and transformed by that Christ light. And then allow yourself to become aware of any other beliefs that are not serving you anymore, that you've been holding about yourself or about another, or about life, about this church or about God, or anything that's not really showing up and reflecting the truth and the beauty, the light. And just notice that. And feel it as an energy. It's just an energy. And just allow yourself to see it surrounded by that light and releasing, moving out of your energy. And if there are any threads or anything that seems to be keeping it attached, just see yourself in your mind's eye snipping it with a pair of scissors or whatever, and releasing it into that light and seeing it being transformed. And again, any emotions or thoughts or any grievances, any belief systems that you're not wanting to continue to hold or create more of. See it surrounded by that Christ light. See it being released, moving even more into that brilliant light of spirit and being transformed. And see the energy that's released from that transformed into even more of the beauty of Christ in you, your hope of glory. Breathe that in now. Give thanks for the transformation and the freedom from all these limiting beliefs that are no longer serving. And give thanks. Take a nice deep breath. Breathing into the heart space. Feel the freedom of that release. Take another nice deep breath. Let your awareness be back in this room, this time and place. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. And so it is.